YouTube, welcome back to this DebateCraft politics discussion between Mike and Max. Mike, how's it going?
What up, brother?
I am doing well today. I am excited for this discussion, although I am curious to see how it goes because it's a topic that has a lot of different angles and is certainly to be controversial. I don't even know what to title this exactly, other than to say it is a topic about when is political violence justified? Do you think, I don't even want your thoughts necessarily on that idea, but do you think if we're taking a title of this discussion is politics or political violence justification, the topic we are discussing?
I think on broadly, that's what we're going for, right? It's like whether or not there are situations that ever warrant political violence. In your opinion, do you think you could ever generalize or come up with the concept of an idea where political violence would be justified?
Okay, so I think I appreciate you asking that question, and the answer to that is in the context in which I live, which is in the United States of America, the answer is absolutely no. And I'm going to say a couple of things. One, first, I wanted to make sure that we understand what we're discussing. We're talking about the justification for political violence. So can you commit violence for the sake of a political cause? I would say no. And reason number one is America has freedom of speech as a place that uniquely has freedom of speech, and saying that violence is not justified because you should be able to use speech, and we have free press, and you should be able to have your goals meted out through non-violent means. I have other reasons for believing this, but I will pause there and have you answer that question for yourself. Is there a justification for political violence?
Broadly, I would say no. In the current context of how the United States is structured, I think political violence is never justified. Examples of this, obviously, Luigi Mangione, Charlie Kirk, situations that were tragic and that are awful and that should never have happened. I want to frame this more from a philosophical just angle. I ask again, is because I know you're saying broadly how we live in the U.S. Is there something that could happen if the United States has a dictatorship? If Trump tries to overtake the government? If somebody's rights are being stripped and slavery is put back in place? Are there ever situations where the government has such a level of control that you would consider violence justified?
Okay. So I really appreciate the framing of that because that leads us to being able to come up with philosophical justifications for this in a reality we don't live in. So if I am willing to concede to a point that in another country, and I don't want to pick a specific country because I'm not trying to talk smack about another country. Let's pick country X. It does not have freedom of speech. Political violence is the only means towards your goal. Perhaps you can justify it. I don't speak for the people of X country in which there is no freedom, but I can imagine there probably feels like there is no other recourse, and I can probably argue in favor of the person who does something unfortunate, something I would necessarily disagree with. And I don't want to speak to certain acts, but there's probably a justification when freedom of speech is not your option. In America, freedom of speech is your option, and therefore there is no justification for that. This is just a reframing, and when we're talking about Luigi and we're talking about things along that lines, we're just talking about modernized versions of the punching Nazis argument. Is it okay to punch a Nazi? Well, I mean, we have freedom of speech. What justification is there to punch a Nazi when you can disagree with them? You're not arguing anything. So what say you about the punching Nazis argument?
I think in the context of, and this is largely, I think, the prime point of the debate, right? It's not necessarily whether political violence should happen because it shouldn't. It's whether it can happen given certain circumstances, right? Or why it happens, even better, given some circumstances. Should you punch a Nazi? Technically, no. If that Nazi were in leadership or in government and that Nazi was oppressing Jews and not allowing them to have rights, do you think a Jewish person would do what they need to do to be able to express themselves and try to earn their rights back? Would that be justified?
Well, we live in a democracy, so my ability to fight back against that oppression is done via free speech and democratic means. So there are outlets that necessarily don't require violence. In fact, the entire American system is built around this idea that we don't need violent revolution. We have a revolution free of violence every 2 and 4 years. So in America, there is never a justification for it, whereas in other countries, absolutely there's a justification for it because they don't have any freedom. I mean, we probably should have a discussion about what other country in the world has freedom of speech. The answer is none, but you could probably argue there's some permissiveness of speech in Europe, I suppose.
Let's go conceptually, because that's how I'm trying to frame this, right? Like conceptually, and we can do it in another country, we can do it in America. I agree. In America, we have outlets that we should utilize before that. But I want to just, can I craft a scenario and we go off that?
You just want to create a hypothetical, and will I agree
Yeah.
political violence is okay in that hypothetical?
I don't think you have to necessarily agree. I just want to craft a scenario because I think it may give context to why sometimes political violence does happen.
Sure.
Let's say a Nazi, for whatever reason, is the president or is a high-ranking official, right? And they start stripping Jews of rights. They start telling Jews can't get married. They start telling Jews they can't vote, and Jews are now subhumans inside this culture. And no matter what Jews are doing, they're protesting, they're out in the streets, they're screaming, they're trying to have their voice be heard, and everyone is ignoring them because now there is almost a populist government that supports this. Is there a point at that where one of those Jewish people may take a stance they shouldn't have to take because democracy should cover this, but let's say it doesn't? One of those Jewish people take a stance that they need to do something to try to earn their freedom because they have been stripped of their rights. Is that type of scenario ever viable?
There's too much abstraction in this example. If it got to the point where, one, there's a bunch of constitutional violations in this scenario, I would imagine. Two, it's happened so subtly over time that there probably should have been a recognition of restrictions earlier that required probably non-violent resistance to it. If it got to that point, I mean, there's so many other things that have fallen to the wayside. You're talking about if America is in a kind of post-apocalyptic or I don't know, just awful state, I guess in that scenario, we're no longer the country that we are now, and then anything is justified because we no longer exist in the same framework of reality.
Sure. Okay. Can I tie this into, like, I guess the larger point that I'm making? This is going to tie into Charlie Kirk. It's going to tie into some other things. So largely, again, I want to just say this outright so there's no misinterpretation of my point. Political violence is not justified. It should never happen. We live in a democracy. A democracy should always cover for all situations. What I want to speak to is how people get in that mindset and why extremism on both the right and the left contribute to this, right? Because I think it all plays into this. Is take Charlie Kirk, for example, which is a prime example. Rip Charlie Kirk, he shouldn't be dead. It's unfortunate what happened to him. Nobody should be killed for saying what they say, even if they say stupid things sometimes. When Charlie Kirk is speaking out against gay people or against people that feel like women who feel like they're having their rights stripped, where abortion has been turned back and women feel like bodily autonomy has been stripped from them, or when gay marriage is being turned back and it's being handed over to the states, and the states have the ability to say, okay, you no longer can be married and we don't technically consider you a person in that regard. Do you think there's ever a situation, again, I played it as an extreme scenario before, but that type of hate speech and that type of rhetoric breeds violence because people feel like their rights are being stripped and they're protesting, they're doing what they need to do, they're petitioning and they feel like nothing they're doing is being received or heard. Do you think people can get in that frame of mind to where they think political violence is justified? Because I think that's the broader issue, is people can find themselves in that mindset.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a doubt that people get into that mindset. They feel desperate. I think in the middle of the COVID era, the BLM protests kind of clearly show that they can sometimes move beyond just protest into unfortunate scenarios where there's more antisocial behavior. And you can understand why people would feel this way and feel it's justified. I'm not sure that ever helps anybody's cause. I don't believe that the broader spectrum of society is like, well, now that it's reached that point, I am somehow now more sympathetic. In fact, I think that often has the opposite effect.
I agree, by the way. Fully agree with all of that.
So I think then that really just reframes it again as this guy is saying things I don't like. So because he's saying things I don't like, I'm going to punch him in the face. You and I think both agree. Let's fight things we disagree with. Let's fight words we disagree with more words, better words, more positive ways of defeating bad ideas. Violence is never that in America, and I'm specifically mean America, a place, the only place with freedom of speech on the level of America that
Right.
it's unique to this country. We can never justify political violence because we have democracy and we have freedom of speech. Political violence is
And
never
we,
justified.
yeah, I fundamentally agree. I still want to take this a little bit further because I think we can go deeper with this. Um, Fundamentally agree with everything you just said. I think a larger cause of this political violence is also the extremes on the right or their left. Do you agree in, I would say, at least the last 8 years? And I'm going to contribute this to Trump because I don't know who else to contribute this to. I think Trump was broadly a wrench the middle class person wanted to throw into the government and just say, fuck you. And Trump was their only way to do that. At least that's what they felt, right? Like
I'll agree with that.
politicians were fucking them
He's
over.
the ultimate
Yeah, people,
agitator of the system. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
yeah. And do you think since Trump's rising, I don't know what else to call it, but it's like the cult of Trump has formed, and there is the extreme right now, and there is the extreme left. Do you agree there is a severe polarization in the party lines at this point?
Yeah, and I think Trump definitely contributes to that because he represents that extreme agitation. It's not a just he's your current conservative views. It's I think even Trump supporters he represents a kind of conservative view, even if it's not like a traditional conservative view. Plus all of the agitation that happens to everybody who disagrees with Trump and views him in a way because he's definitely abrasive. I don't think anybody's even the biggest Trump supporters are going to recognize he's a pretty abrasive guy, and he doesn't hold back on it. He's not pulling any punches with it. So yeah, it just polarizes more, and it just creates a greater divide, and then we see more extremes on either side. So that understandably emotional reaction can lead to the worst aspects of humanity, which is just unjustified violence for the sake of one's cause, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that's largely, I mean, obviously, we are not in a bubble. I think there's a large movement going on. And I mean, we see it through YouTube videos, we see it through politics, we see it through everything. And is the left violent, right? That's like one of the big topics right now. And I don't necessarily know if the left as a whole is violent. I don't think they are. I think the left is being pushed into a corner and to be fair, I want to speak clearly. I think the left is also full of insane people as well. Somebody that's willing to take a gun and shoot somebody is insane. But again, the polarization from Trump has took the right so far to the right that it's absurd that the left, if they weren't already there, are now responding to that, and they're now so far to the left, it's absurd. But when you have those polarization issues, and Trump is stripping back rights, he's stripping women rights, he's stripping gay rights, that extreme divide is often the cause of political violence. So I think my point of this is like, what do we do to stop that, right? Like as a country, do we feed into that? Do we play into the ideology of hate? Do we protest? What do we do as a people? Like to the people that are committing this, right? To the gay people that can't get married, to the women who want to have an abortion because they don't have the money, or they literally cannot support this child, or they were raped and they're still forced to have a baby because fucking some conservative states are insane. What do you say to those people, to the people that may feel like I have no other voice, I don't have a way to be heard, and I need to do something? People that are out protesting, that are causing issues. What do you say to those people that feel like they aren't being heard and their rights are being stripped?
To anybody who feels a particular way, the important thing to always understand is your feelings are justified. What you feel is understandable, and you might feel the greatest amount of agitation because it's understandable when you have X, Y, and Z happening, and certainly Trump contributes to that. So if you're kind of getting tunnel vision in the political system right now, in all the political aspects of that, and you feel horrible about it, it's understandable. What isn't justified is getting a gun and doing something awful. What isn't justified is committing political violence. If you feel in such a way that you need to do something, and I'll just call it, and kind of I feel ridiculous having to say it this way. I'm just going to say if you feel the need to do something excessively antisocial, you need to seek help. You should not be in a circumstance where your tunnel vision on politics is causing you to feel that agitated. If you are in a circumstance that the government is acting against you in such a way, you need to take political action. You need to talk to your local politicians, and you need to do the things that are proper in a democracy. What is not okay is taking antisocial action anyway. I
I,
do believe that the worst thing about Trump, beyond the political aspects of it, I don't agree with Trump's politics, but I think the worst stuff is the abrasive, bloviating kind of rhetoric that Trump uses, and that is harmful. And the people who are most harmed by that end up doing negative things. I don't actually, to respond to your issue with people on the left, I don't think that's unique to people on the left. And we're also talking about extremes. We're not talking about rational people on the left. We're not talking about rational people on the right. It is extremes, and it just gets amplified, and that doesn't reflect on any political sides. It just happens to be that that's the case that's being amplified now.
I,
And people just need to, you know, temper back a bit.
I somewhat agree. I mean, again, I think political violence is never justified. What I'm trying to do is just, again, frame how this is happening because I think it's completely obvious how it's happening. And we as a country, we as a people, are doing nothing to really prevent it. And a lot of that is because of the gridlock of the government and the government's inability to do things, right? And it is because, like, it would happen on the left. I don't want to say that it wouldn't. If the left had a majority in everything, there would be left, probably right policies like guns and things that the conservatives value that would be taken away. But because conservatives have the mass majority right now and everything is conservative, rights are getting rolled back. So it's like I wish as a whole, we as a people would be able to come together and ideally find middle ground in this because I think the polarization and the mass split in the party system is largely what's contributing to this. And I think we're seeing it because the right's in control. And I think if the left were in control, against popular opinion, I think the right would also be probably doing similar things. Like if somebody were trying to take guns away from conservatives because they had majorities, I think we would be seeing violence back in protest to that. So I think my larger take on this is we should ideally, in some perfect world, hopefully be able to find a way to come to a middle ground so the massive split in party lines isn't what's contributing to this, because I feel like that's where most of this is at.
I certainly agree with that. It is always a good idea for the tone to be tempered down a bit and the passion of people to be kind of put in perspective. Certainly, it's a controversial issue. I think there's plenty of things that need to be fixed on the left and the right, and we all just really need to kind of cool it down. Obviously, it's controversial. I'm sure a lot of people have various opinions on this. Please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for listening to this. If you have an opinion, please leave it in the comments. Thank you so much. This has been DebateCraft Politics.